Leo Tolstoy, perhaps the greatest writer of the 19th century, certainly one of the greatest Russian writers of all time. What does this man have to say about eating animals and its morality? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Threpticon. Today, we're going to talk about Tolstoy, who needs probably no introduction. But briefly, I'll talk about his biography. All right. So, who was Leo Tolstoy? He was born in 1829 into an aristocratic family in a rural area of Russia, in a place called Yasnaya Polyana. From what I understand, maybe 100 miles south of Moscow or so. Um, he had many professions throughout his life: an author, a teacher, a philosopher, theologian, social activist. His principal novels, he's known mainly for his novels, his kind of long, epic novels, War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Um, Other books like The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Um, and then he published many other books, short stories, books of nonfiction, philosophy, theology. And he had a long life, right? He was very long lived. And then he died in 1910 in Russia, right before the Russian Revolution. So his thought is heavily influenced by Schopenhauer, right? The idea of will and representation in the world made of these kind of forms. So German philosophy has a huge influence on Tolstoy, and especially Schopenhauer is known as a philosopher of pessimism and negativity, right? Hugely influenced by socialism, right? He was living in the 19th century, right? The century of Marx, and he saw during his lifetime the emancipation of the Russian peasants, right? Because they lived in a feudal system. When he was born, they were emancipated, they were freed from that system, um, and this had a huge influence on his thought. Also, Christianity, especially later in life, he became extremely interested in Christian ethics. Let's put it that way. So his diet, he was kind of famous for a very simple diet, especially later in life. Maybe earlier in life, he indulged in all sorts of things, but his main staple foods was bread, porridge, eggs, fruit and vegetables, right? I mean, this is what country people eat, you know what I mean? Especially in that area. They eat some kind of grain, either as bread or porridge, eggs from chickens, fruit and vegetables. So you can see it's a lacto ovo vegetarian diet. I mean, he doesn't really mention milk. I believe he did drink milk, but maybe it wasn't his favorite thing. But he does write this introduction. He writes an introduction in which he calls the first step. The title of this is The First Step, and he claims that kindness to animals and not killing and eating them is the first step to kind of moral perfection. So here's what he says. This movement should cause a special joy to those whose life lies in the effort to bring about the kingdom of God on earth, not because vegetarianism is in itself an important step towards that kingdom. All true steps are both important and unimportant, but because it is a sign that the aspiration of mankind toward moral perfection is serious and sincere, for it is taken the one unalterable order of succession natural to it, beginning with the first step. One cannot fail to rejoice at this, as people could not fail to rejoice who, after striving to reach the upper story of a house, by trying vainly and at random to climb the walls from different points, should at last assemble at the first steps of the staircase. And I believe by ascending towards it, convinced that there is no way, convinced that there can be no way up except by the mounting the first step of the stairs. So he compares this to a first step. People randomly trying to climb up a building, and they're happy to be able to find a step of a stair, right? So this is easy. It's an easy step people can take, saying, "Oh, look at these animals, these cows, sheep, chicken, pigs. I don't have to kill these to eat. Wow, maybe that makes me a slightly better person. And then that's the essence of this here. As you can see, the prose is somewhat dense, but that's the essence of what he's saying. And then in his book about really about his theological point of view, his book on religion, he mentions sort of this innate human instinct to be compassionate. No one will deny that not only to kill or torture a man, but to torture a dog, to kill a fowl or a calf, is to inflict suffering, reproved by human nature. And then he says, I have known of farmers who had ceased to eat meat solely because it had fallen to their lot to slaughter animals. And yet our existence is so organized that every personal enjoyment is purchased at the price of human suffering, contrary to human nature. So here he's talking about that human nature, right? We don't want to kill people naturally. We don't want to kill dogs, chickens, calves. And then he talks about these farmers, right, who were forced to be butchers, right? And then that caused them to not want to eat the meat themselves because it was so horrifying and disgusting. And then he laments about how our world is set up, right? All this division of labor and exploitation of other people. So his idea of kindness and compassion towards animals really had to do with human society as well, right? It was all connected for him. And I got one more quote after this. Here indeed outwardly are we met, but inwardly we are bound to every living creature. Already are we conscious of many of the motions of the spiritual world, but others have not yet borne in upon us. Nevertheless they come, even as the earth presently comes to see the light of the stars, which to our eyes at this moment is invisible. So here he's connecting all life on earth to one another, right? We are all bound to every living creature. That's what he says. Exactly. And he's talking about that relationship to all of creation, right? To the stars and everything else in it. So let's talk about his influence. So he had an influence on a Christian sect called the Dukhobors, a Christian sect that followed the teaching of Tolstoy, and this inspired them to become vegetarians, right? And at least a part of them moved to Canada, and that's where they set up their community upon these ideals, these Christian vegetarian ideals. So here's my question. Why were so many great thinkers drawn to vegetarianism only later in life? We talk about Tolstoy here. There's other people that I need to do videos on, like Einstein, so on and so forth. So why were they only drawn to this in later life? And I'm talking like later, 60s, 50s, 60s. And then only partially, like Tolstoy, I don't know what his daily habit was. I don't know if he ate fish. I don't know if he ate meat sometimes. He was more of a flexitarian. It seems like he thinks, he's better than that sort of thing. Oh, I deal with ideas. I deal with, ideals. I can't, be bothered with these tiny little details. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, with that, I will thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.